Hey, what do you say, Kraken fans? In just a little while, we're going to get into our latest episode of Good Reads Monday featuring Hailey Salvian. But I first want to make sure you know all about the top 50 NHL players that the Locked On NHL Podcast Network has put together. You can listen and watch for the top 50 players. We've already had Philip Grubauer from the Seattle Kraken selected. He was the first goalie. To subscribe to Locked On NHL right here on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. That's Locked On NHL for our top 50 NHL players heading in to the 2021-22 season. Let's go, Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are the Seattle Kraken.
And this is our Monday episode of Good Reads for this week, and we are joined from The Athletic, the beat writer for the Calgary Flames, Hailey Salvian. Hailey, how are you?
I'm good. It's nice to actually see your face. I feel like I haven't seen you since I was in New York and we bumped into each other on the train. I think that's when we first saw each other. We didn't see each other at the stadium. It was on the train to White Plains, New York. It was Erica.
That's
Hello.
So wild.
So
That's
it's nice
right.
to actually see you.
I know.
Yeah,
that is
so random.
That would have been the last time, right? Because Kia Nurse was playing for the New York Liberty at the time. But first, Hailey, every time we have a guest here on Locked On Kraken, I like to start with this question. It comes from the movie Brown Sugar, and it's basically, when did you fall in love with hockey?
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, I grew up in a small town in southern Ontario. There's not a whole lot to do in Fergus, Ontario. And I never actually got to play hockey growing up because there was no girls' team. It was always my favorite sport. And it was always on TV at home, like Hockey Night in Canada. Every Saturday, that was the thing. We watched all of the games. And, in Fergus, we were so close to Guelph and Kitchener. London's a little bit farther away. So I really spent a lot of time going to Ontario Hockey League games, the Guelph Storm. And at the time, there were so many good players in the Canadian Hockey League and the OHL specifically when I was growing up. Drew Doughty played for the Storm. You had John Tavares with Oshawa, and then he ended up going to London. And you could just really go down the list. There was a lot of future NHL stars playing in the Ontario Hockey League and kind of in my region growing up. So I very much grew up going to these games and seeing these players in junior. And that was really where it came from, is just going to the rink with my dad and watching these games. And at first I wanted to be a teacher because I just loved sports. I loved hockey. I played basketball and soccer at a pretty high level. And I was like, maybe I'll be a gym teacher. I just want to be involved in sports in this next phase of my life. And I used to coach basketball camps with my old coach. And I think it was the second or third camp that I was coaching where I was like, I don't have the patience to do this for the rest of my life. Kids are great. I love coaching. It's really satisfying. But no, I know myself. I can't do this. And I think I watched, it was, seeing Christine Simpson on Hockey Night in Canada and seeing Jennifer Hedger and Kate Burness here in Canada on TSN. And football was a huge part of my growing up too. So seeing Erin Andrews on the NFL Countdown, I very much started to see women in those positions. And I was like, maybe I'll do that. That's a way, I talk a lot, as you'll see on this podcast. I love sports. So it just always kind of felt like this very natural, desire for me after I got over the whole teaching thing, which was quite early. So yeah, and I think hockey was just always part of that for me. It was just always something I wanted to work in. It was always something that I loved. And I just really think it all kind of goes back to growing up and being at these games and watching it all the time, with my dad and everything. So that's kind of my long-winded way. I think I've just always loved it. Like, I don't know if there was like a single moment that I can trace back to, but it's just always been there.
But you have moved to Calgary to cover the Flames. So like, how did that come about? What has that transition been like, especially because, I don't know, there's this whole thing called coronavirus that popped up.
Just that little pandemic.
Yeah,
a little bit. I'm really bad at kind of telling this because I feel like there was just so much that happened in a pretty short period of time after I graduated from university. So I always try to spark notes it for people. But, you know, I went to Ryerson University, which is actually changing its name because the namesake of the university is named after something Edgerton. I don't even recall his first name. Forgive me, but they're actually changing the name because it's named after a man who was like involved in residential schools and stuff like that. So I'll try not to continue calling it that. But I went to university in Toronto, and I did the 4-year Bachelor of Journalism program. And when I was there was a sport media program as well. And I decided to take journalism because I just thought, you know, if I took just sports broadcast, I'm going to be this like one trick pony. I'm only going to know how to do one thing. And just looking at the way that the industry was going and everything, I just thought, you know, the more well-rounded you can be, I think the better. So I started as a general assignment reporter doing like women's sports, so women's hockey. That's how we first met. Doing the WNBA. That's how we saw each other in New York and in Brooklyn because I was doing a story with Kia, and then I was covering the Toronto Marlies as well. And so that was this really awesome year for me. And then right after that, they were like, "Do you want an NHL job? Like, we're looking for someone to go to Ottawa." So I went to the Sens beat, did that for a year, and there was like just so much happened in Ottawa, and I think at the end of the year there was an opening in Calgary, and our editor said, like, "You did a really great job in Ottawa, and Calgary is a market that we really want to try to build up in the way that you did in Ottawa. Like, can you try to just redo this over here?" And I thought it was a cool opportunity. I've never been in this part of the country. I've obviously never covered the Western Conference either. And so I just felt kind of going back to when I was at CBC and in college, just thinking like the more well-rounded I can be, the better. So it's like, okay, let's go and try to tackle. I've done the Eastern Conference with, you know, the Marlies and Leafs and the Sens. So let's try to tackle the West. And obviously it turned into the North Division. There's the whole pandemic, and moving across the country in a pandemic to cover a hockey season with zero access. Like, it was so hard. This year was really, really difficult. I didn't feel like I could tell the kind of stories that I wanted to, but also being brand new in this market, you want to make an impression to the people that you're introducing yourself to. You want to do good journalism, but man, it was a really, really hard year. And I'm really looking forward to things hopefully going back to normal because it was tough.
Wow. That is, first of all, I did not realize that your like breakthrough with The Athletic was a Natalie Achanwa story. I love that. We're going to have to get you on Locked On Women's Basketball to tell that story. But love a strong crossover. I love a strong crossover. But I want to get to, let's get into, so then how did you overcome some of that with Calgary? I mean, we all know as media that it can be really difficult on the one hand, especially to do the kind of stories that The Athletic likes to do, where you're kind of really painting a picture and you're getting into something that, you know, everyone has access to, but you tell it in a different way. Those stories are difficult when everyone is on a Zoom call together and you're asking, you know, a bunch of questions in front of other reporters. So how did you go about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really hard. And for me, I think people who maybe like got to know my writing in Ottawa, they know like I'm way more interested in telling the personal story. I want to tell the story of Nick Paul overcoming the mental blocks that he had for years and his anxiety problems to finally break through and make the NHL. I want to tell the story of Mark Borowiecki and his wife Tara finally having their first child, but they're afraid of him getting traded. I'm more interested in telling the personal side of things. And that's really hard to do not just because it's on Zoom, but because you don't know these people yet. Like, that's always the way that I approach this job. Like, yes, these are athletes. Yes, it's a hockey player, but like, that's a person. And so for me, I've always approached the job with, hi, my name's Hailey. Like, nice to meet you. How's your wife? How's your dog? Like, you can talk to them like they're human beings. And I think some of the best stories come out of building those relationships in a locker room, because you get to know the person, and then they feel more comfortable with you. For when something does happen, they can talk to you and feel comfortable with it and not feel, like, who is this person that I'm telling like all these intricate details of my personal life? Like the
Right.
Mark and Tara Borowiecki story is one of the favorite things that I think I've ever written, because of how personal that was. They had tried to have a baby for like 8 years, and then they finally did IVF, and Tara finally gets pregnant, and it's this like really beautiful thing for their family. And then Mark's an unrestricted free agent, and he's on the trade block, and there's all these rumors and those trade lists, and it's like, that's a family. Like, he's been waiting for almost 10 years to have a baby, and he might miss it. Like,
Wow.
I get the trade list. I get the UFA boards. I get it. It's a business, but like, there are personal sides to these kind of things. And those are the kind of stories I love to tell. So we'll see what next season brings.
Oh, well, I really appreciate you offering that. I definitely did notice that your work took more of a data and numbers and kind of analysis slant while with Calgary. And last week on Monday's episode of Goodreads, we had Allison Lukin on, and she is someone who is very much about the data-driven storytelling. So it's interesting from last week to this week, hear different approaches to the same sport. But Hailey, I want to get more into some of what you did for Calgary, including the first time that you got to, at least to your knowledge, be visible to Mark Giordano. So we're going to talk about that coming up next on Locked On Kraken. Hey folks, it is that time of year again. All eyes are getting ready to focus on American football. Teams are back on the gridiron to start the football season. And as always, BetOnline is your number one pro and college football action spot for the season. Get all of the updated odds, props, and contests, including online's biggest $500,000 NFL mega contest, the world's largest $200,000 NFL survivor contest, and much more over at BetOnline. Head to the website, or you can use your laptop, your mobile device, your tablet, whatever you got. Sign up today and you can receive not a 50%, but a 100% bonus on your first deposit. And be sure to take advantage of the opening day promo. You make a bet on the Thursday, September 9th season opener between Super Bowl champions, the Buccaneers, and the Dallas Cowboys. If you lose, your wager will be refunded up to $25 for new customers only. Of course, when signing up using promo code NFL100. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. We're talking boxing, football, basketball, and of course, hockey. So head to BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Hey again, folks. Does this sound kind of familiar? You've got one device to catch a game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows, and you're watching sports highlights on your smartphone, and everything is under your neighbor's best friend's dog's name or however you're logging on. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all of that entertainment you love without any of the hassle. And that, of course, is through DirecTV Stream. It is something that brings all of your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, your favorite movies, and your favorite shows all in one place. That means when we're juggling remotes, you don't have to worry about all of the different logins and sign-ins, and if there's too many people on the same account, none of that. So get rid of the clutter and get rid of the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. And of course, content varies depending on your streaming package. Again, we are here with Hailey Salvian of The Athletic. We talked a little bit about her journey into covering hockey, covering sports in general for The Athletic, and how that led her to Calgary. Hailey, you were telling us in the first segment that you really had to find a new way to tell stories because of COVID and coronavirus and the lack of access. But I want to now get into a little bit of maybe how you want to take the lessons that you learned from that and perhaps blend some of that into what you hope will be more access in the 2021-22 season.
Yeah, well, I think the way I've kind of approached it is, this upcoming season is my first real season with the Calgary Flames, but I just have, X amount of months prior knowledge and more research, essentially. I have more stuff to look back on and think, okay, I know what, Noah Hannafin did last season. More like you can do research when you move to a new city, but it's not the same as being there and watching and talking to people and learning. So I'm kind of approaching it as like, this is my first real year in Calgary, but I have last season's whole worth of information.
Yeah. Hailey, coming up next on Locked On Kraken, we want to get into what we can expect in the Pacific Division. Will be new kids on the block or new kids on the ice, but also would love to just get your thoughts on the former Calgary Flames captain. And we don't know who the captains are going to be yet, but you got to think Mark Giordano has a pretty decent chance at being one of the leaders on the Kraken. So we're going to keep you around and get into that coming up next. Did you know that Built Bar has so many delicious flavors? Yeah, there's a bunch of them, and we want you to get the inside scoop on everything that is Built Bar. My personal favorite is the double chocolate. The coconut almond flavor that was out for a little bit, very popular with my family. But we've got cherry barcia, salted caramel, German chocolate, cookies and cream, and the list goes on. Can't decide? Don't have a favorite flavor? No worries. Just try their mixed box and you'll get 2 of each of the 9 original flavors. And here's the best part. Built Bar is great to work into your fitness routine. If you're running around like me, podcasting all day, doing interviews, running around, the ragged in the city, you're definitely going to want Built Bar because they carry 130 to 180 calories. So they're a good hearty snack while not being too high in either sugar or carbs. It's only 4 to 5 grams of sugar, 4 to 5 grams of carbs, but 17 to 18 grams of protein per bar, every bar covered in chocolate. And also, not only are they a sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network, but they are also the official protein bar of the U.S. track and field team. How cool is that? So check out our good friends over at Built Bar. Head to built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 at built.com. All right, we are closing out our conversation with Hailey Salvian. If you are not already following her on Twitter, make sure you do that at Hailey_Salvian. And of course, follow her work over at The Athletic. But Hailey, want to bring you in because first, I mentioned this earlier on the pod, but you had this really funny exchange with Mark Giordano for the Athletic hockey podcast where you found out from Mark that the whole time when you were on Zoom, the players can see you. Can you just recount exactly how you knew players could see you on Zoom?
Yeah, so we had Mark in the green room, we'll call it. So, before we started recording, we just said, hi, welcome, and I introduced myself. I was like, I was covering the Flames all year, but we never actually got to meet. Nice to meet you. And that was that. And then we start the show, and Mark is great. He was so grateful or gracious with his time, and it was a great chat. And Ian Mendez, my co-host, said, oh, Hailey just had to introduce herself to Mark in the green room. That's just this funny little thing about Zoom. And I was like, yeah, like, I don't even think they ever like saw me. I was like, I don't know. And Mark was like, yeah, we could. Like every time you would ask a question, you'd raise your hand and then you'd like blow up on the big screen in front of us. And I was like, oh no. And you just have that moment of like, you go to bed later that night and you start thinking like, oh no, like did I have weird, like what was happening in the background? Like this is usually where I'm sitting or I'm at the rink. I was asking Mark a question and my computer froze. And that was the moment I knew that he could see me because he was like, oh, I think she's frozen. And I was like, oh no. When you pause a movie and the person looks really weird and stupid, I was like, oh crap. Oh, damn it.
Oh, man.
So yeah, that was the fun moment. That's the like glorious thing about Zoom is
Yeah.
You don't know what they can see. You don't know what's going on back there.
Well, I mean, it's too bad that Mark didn't get to meet you IRL in real life, because I remember the first time I met you in real life, we were at a Markham Thunder game. And so I'm from New York, as you know, as most people who listen to the show know. And so I just assume, even though I now know I should not continue to do this, but I just assume like everyone has public transportation just like New York City. So I like took like all these random buses and whatnot to get to the game. And there was this snowstorm coming in. And I was like, well, I hope I get somewhere warm. And then you were like, do you want to ride? And I was like, I mean, that sounds great.
Well, because you said that you were going to take the bus back downtown. I was like, we're in Markham. Like, no, the public transit in the city is questionable at best, let alone going from like Markham downtown. I was just like, no, you're not.
Yeah, so saved me then. And then it's funny, we're like getting into the truck that you had with you. And then I think you asked me something like, you're not like a axe murderer or something. And I was like,
yeah, I was like, are you gonna stab? No.
And I was like, I mean, no, but I remember thinking to myself like, okay, but like, what if I was? Like, she just like believed me.
Like we just met and I was just like, yeah, I'll give you a ride. Like, let's hang out in the car alone for 30 minutes with a stranger. No, it was it was totally fine. It was totally cool.
It was totally fine. And I was so thankful and appreciative because by the time you dropped me off at my Airbnb, which I had to stay at for an extra 2 days because we got snowed in, the snow was like coming down serious. And then I felt bad because I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, I hope Hailey gets home. Like, what if she gets stuck?
Oh God, no. I lived really close to where you were staying, so we were totally fine. And I think I had winter tires. Awesome. So we were all good.
Okay, good. I was
That's like, a Canadian thing that you just need.
Yeah. See, we don't do that in New York City. What is like the conversation though around Calgary, like losing their captain? Because that just seems like a weird thing.
Yeah, I think that it's one of those things where if you're grading or rating the off-season moves, like this one is good and bad. I think the price to try to protect Mark Giordano was too high. It was a first and a third round pick. And the Flames also had 3 other younger, longer term contracts on their blue line. So, from a business sense and a team building sense, it just didn't make sense to, you don't lose Chris Tanev, who just had one of the best, defensive impact seasons in the last decade. You don't lose Chris Tanev for one more year of Gio, despite how much everyone loves Gio. He's the captain. He's had one of the greatest bet on yourself stories. He's an incredible athlete. He's a good leader. He's a figure in the community. But, it's a first and a third round pick, or you're losing one of your other younger defensemen. And I think even Mark understood that it didn't make sense. He said that on the podcast. He said that to Brad Treliving. He said, do what you need to do. And, Treliving tried to make it work. But they couldn't. It's a really high price to pay for a defender who's going to be turning 38 years old this season. That being said, Gio's still a top pair player. He's still a really, really good defenseman. He's a good leader. I think the Kraken are getting, for me, it was always a no-brainer. Like, I was not surprised that they lost Mark Giordano, because why would the Kraken not take Mark Giordano? For everything that we said, that's a loss for the Flames. Like, that's now Seattle's gain. He's a great leader. He's a great defender. He's a good guy in the community, good guy in the room. So Seattle's really adding that to the fold. But I guess the conversation in Calgary now is, how do you replace that on the blue line? And you don't. There's not like a one player that you can plug in to replace the hard minutes that Mark Giordano played. Tons of even strength, tons of PK. He quarterbacked the power play. Like, he played really tough minutes for the Flames for a long time. Like, this is a Norris Trophy winner when he was like 35 years old. Like, this man is pretty old for defenders, like, standpoint. But he's still like one of the top like defensive defensemen. I wouldn't call him a defensive defenseman. I think he's more well-rounded than that, but he's still, rated as a number one defenseman by like our analytical models. So the Flames didn't really replace that in terms of the moves that they made. Like, I think their blue line has really taken a step back this year. With the loss of Gio, they brought in Nikita Zadorov. They've got some other young D, but they had a young blue line last year, and it didn't work great for the Flames with Gio. So I don't know what they're going to look like without him. I think their forward group took a step forward with the additions they made, but their blue line looks, definitely worse than last year. And I would also say, who's going to step in? The other narrative around this is like, who's the next captain of the Calgary Flames? And for me, I think if you're the Flames, you don't name a captain right away. I think Gio was the obvious choice. Like, when Iginla got traded to Pittsburgh, Mark got the C like right away. The very next season, he was the captain. He was the most natural choice to take over for Jerome Iginla. And I think right now, when you're looking at it, there isn't that obvious choice. Matthew Tkachuk only has 1 year left on the bridge deal that he signed, and then he's a restricted free agent with arb rights. And there's been these questions around, is he going to sign long-term? Is he going to just try to go play with his brother or try to play in St. Louis? We don't really know. So I think if the Flames can lock Matthew Tkachuk in long-term, he's the next captain. I think he's long been assumed to be the next captain of the Calgary Flames, but I think you want to make sure you know what the long-term future of a player is before you slap the C on the jersey. And you've got some other options, but there's just no one obvious that stands out and makes sense right now. So I think for the Flames, they have a ton of leaders in that locker room. You have Jacob Markstrom, you have Chris Tanev, you have Milan Lucic, you have Tkachuk, Michael Backlund. You've got guys who've taken on leadership roles, but I just don't think one of them stands out as the obvious captain. So I think, the blue line taking a step back and who's going to wear the C have been the two biggest conversations about losing Mark Giordano. And so, both of them kind of remain to be seen.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm very curious to see what Gio is going to do with the Seattle Kraken, not just from a leadership perspective. And Allison Lukin talked a lot about that when we had her on last week on Goodreads, but also just thinking about, I think the Seattle Kraken on paper, I'm definitely an eye test person, so I'll be excited to see them when training camp starts. But this team on paper for me looks pretty solid defensively. I am a little bit concerned when it comes to where the offense is going to come from, especially early on, because Yanni Gourde will be out with injury. So I think it will be incumbent on players like Giordano to really get this young team in the right mindset, like everything that we were talking about for Women's Worlds. But I want to go to the Pacific Division. So I'm looking at the Bet Online odds. The Vegas Golden Knights right now, at least, are at the top of the table, followed by Edmonton, the Seattle Kraken, then the Calgary Flames. We go Vancouver, Los Angeles, San Jose, and Anaheim after that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, everyone kind of talks about how weak the Pacific Division is. I think that Edmonton made some, I know everyone kind of likes to joke about some of the things they did, like overspending and like, Cody, Ceci. But I obviously think that, Edmonton's a team that we can probably safely project to make the playoffs in the Pacific. I think Vegas is the only team that most people would say would probably win that division just because of what they've done. I am curious what's going to happen, though, if they do take a step back this year. I don't know if they will. it's hard to know without, everything's just on paper right now, right? So it's hard to
Right.
know, but I think that looking at the Flames, I think the Flames should be the number 3 or 4 team, in that division. Yeah, the Kraken's tough. Like, I agree with you. I think that they have really good D. You've got Alexiak, you've got Adam Larson. Like, you're in a position where Mark Giordano might be on your second pair, depending on how they do their D pairings. And I think that shows the depth of the defenders that they have. But yeah, their forward group is, I think people were maybe expecting them to trade some of the defenders that they drafted to get better forwards. So we'll see. They've got pretty good goaltending too. So I think that the Kraken could be in the mix. I don't know if we're going to see like a Vegas style start for the Seattle Kraken. But yeah, like, I think what you ranked seems fairly accurate to me. I think we're probably looking at like a Vegas, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, Seattle kind of top tier vibe, because I don't think we really know what we have in these California teams either. Like, San Jose is in such a tough spot. Like, they've handcuffed them to so many like aging bad contracts who are really starting to regress. Like, they're stuck. They can't do anything. You're not moving those pieces with those contracts. I think the Kings could like take a step forward. I don't know if they're going to be like a playoff team next year, but I think they'll get there pretty quickly with some of the pieces that they added, and we'll see what Quentin Byfield looks like next year. Anaheim is, I think they probably need more time too. So the California teams are the only ones, I think if we can say that they're in the bottom tier of that division, and I think Seattle's a major question mark. Yeah, I think what you read sounds pretty good. Like, I'm really bad at this kind of stuff because like you, like, I like to actually see these teams before I start ranking them, right? Like, this is all on paper. Like, last year in the North Division, a lot of people said that the Flames were going to win the North. Like, people were like, the Flames will be first or second. Like, Toronto's going to be number 1, but the Flames will really push in that top tier. Because looking at them on paper, they looked pretty good. Not good.
No,
didn't make the playoffs.
Didn't work out.
So I'm like, I don't know.
Who knows?
I'm not saying anything until I see these teams, but
exactly.
I think, it'll be interesting to see. But the Pacific will, like, if we look at the Pacific Division, it's an easier spot for a team like the Flames or Seattle to push for a playoff spot more so than like the Atlantic or the Metro.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there, which is kind of the opposite of what we see in another sport that we cover, which is basketball, right? You usually see everyone stacked over in the Western Conference, but not so much in hockey. But we'll have to circle the calendar, Hailey, as Gio, his return to Calgary is in December, right around the holidays. So, we'll see how that goes. But Hailey Salvian, thank you so much for your time. You gave us so much. We're going to break this up for fans, and they're just going to get a double dose of Hailey Salvian, because I was like, nope, we're going long. We're going long. It's all good stuff.
We're just going to keep chatting. Yeah.
We're going to keep chatting. I mean, it's been well over a year since we got to hang out in New York. So it was good to catch up. But Hailey, thank you so much for joining us on Locked On Kraken. I hope you remain safe as you are finishing out Worlds, and then hopefully you'll get a little bit of time off before gearing up for training camp come the end of September.
Thank you.
All right, folks, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Kraken. As always, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll have more things coming up for you on Goodreads Monday. And of course, until next time we speak again, stay locked on Kraken. Hey folks, did you know that betting on the National Hockey League doesn't have to be a guessing game if you listen to the new Locked On Bets podcast hosted by your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. You can get your daily picks, blowout specials, wrong team favorite picks, and of course, Lee Sterling's lock of the day. Follow Locked On Bets podcast, brought to you by betonline.ag, wherever you get podcasts.